Diversity is nothing new to the Raiders. Literally since the inception of the franchise in the American Football League in 1960, it's been woven into their fabric. The Raiders' quarterback that inaugural season was Tom Flores, the first Latino starting quarterback in professional football. In 1968, the Raiders made Eldridge Dickey the first black quarterback to be drafted in the first round, though they immediately moved him to wide receiver. "20 years after Flores broke a barrier as a player, he became the first head coach of color to win a Super Bowl when he led the Raiders to a win over the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 15. Flores was succeeded by Mike Shanahan in 1988. Just 4 games into Shanahan's second season, he was fired and replaced on an interim basis by Art Shell. A Hall of Fame player with the Raiders from 1968 to 1982, Shell went 7-5 and was promoted ahead of the 1990 season, making him the first full-time black head coach in NFL history. But the Raiders' willingness to blaze trails hasn't been limited to football operations. In 1997, they hired Amy Trask as the NFL's first female CEO. And in 2022, the franchise hired Sandra Douglas Morgan as the first black woman team president in league history. When Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly were promoted to interim head coach and general manager last October, the Raiders became the first team in NFL history with a black head coach, GM and president. Late Raiders owner Al Davis was willing to put people of color and women in prominent positions, and that trend has been continued by his son, Mark. Being open to the top candidate, regardless of color or gender, has been part of this franchise for decades. "I hired her because of who she is," Davis told The Athletic last year about Douglas Morgan, "not because of what she is." In hiring Pierce as the full-time head coach Friday, Davis stayed true to that ideology. While Pierce's hiring is not as significant as Shell's over 3 decades ago, it remains important given the NFL's continued struggles with racial diversity. Pierce joins Shell, Romeo Crennel, Leslie Frazier and Mike Singletary in becoming just the 5th black interim head coach to subsequently land his team's full-time job in NFL history. With the odds stacked against him, he pulled off the improbable. Obviously, the Raiders didn't hire Pierce just because he was black. They hired him because, after taking over for the fired Josh McDaniels 8 games into the season, he changed everything for the Raiders. The team went 5-4 over its final 9 games, while Pierce energized the locker room, empowered his assistant coaches and instilled a positive culture that reverberated throughout team headquarters. In 2 months, the Raiders went from a rudderless franchise to one with promise and a clear foundation. Despite that, there was no guarantee Pierce would get the job. Interim coach Rich Bisaccia, who's white, led the Raiders to a playoff berth in 2021 and still didn't get the full-time job. Steve Wilks, who's black, nearly led the Carolina Panthers to a playoff berth as an interim coach in 2022 and didn't get the full-time job. That drives home the noteworthiness of Pierce's promotion, and its effects could extend far beyond Las Vegas. From 2019 to 2023, the NFL began each season with just 3 head coaches who identify as black. Now, however, after the New England Patriots hired Jerod Mayo and the Raiders promoted Pierce, there are 5 black head coaches. Including Miami Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel, who identifies as multiracial, and New York Jets coach Robert Saleh, who's Lebanese. There are now 7 head coaches of color. In an NFL where offensive-minded, and largely white, coordinators land the majority of the head coaching jobs, it's noteworthy that Mayo and Pierce made the same leap from linebackers coach in becoming the first 2 hires of the cycle. And with 6 vacancies remaining, the Tennessee Titans, Washington Commanders, Los Angeles Chargers, Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers and Seattle Seahawks, it could grow into a trend this offseason. There are plenty of defensive-minded white coaches who would also stand to benefit. Former head coaches Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel, along with defensive coordinators Mike Macdonald, Baltimore Ravens, Dan Quinn, Dallas Cowboys, and Lou Anarumo, Cincinnati Bengals, among others, will draw strong consideration for the remaining vacancies.